The calls started casually. It was 7 p.m. on April 1st, 2000. In an apartment on 7th Avenue in Manhattan, a 22-year-old mother named Indira Montiero was on the phone with one of her closest friends. They weren't talking about danger. They weren't talking about fear. They were talking about the future. Indira was excited. She was planning to launch her own website to sell clothing for petite women, a dream she was building while studying accounting and raising her one-year-old daughter. But then the conversation shattered. In the background, the friend heard a man's voice. It wasn't a casual interruption. It was screaming, cursing, a sudden explosion of rage that drowned out Indira's excitement. Then Indira shouted 3 words that would haunt her friend for the rest of her life. "Leave me alone!" She promised to call her friend back the next day, and she hung up the phone. The next day came. The phone never rang. Indira Montiero didn't call back. She didn't show up for work. She didn't come home. That sudden, terrified plea, "Leave me alone," was the last time anyone ever heard her voice. In this Missing Persons Cases documentary, we uncover how a 22-year-old mother became one of New York's most haunting unsolved missing persons cases. In the world of missing persons mysteries, the silence is often the loudest clue. To understand the silence that followed that phone call, you have to understand the noise of Indira Montiero's life. In the spring of 2000, Indira was a woman in motion. At just 22 years old, she was balancing a heavy load, but she made it look effortless. She was working as an accounting clerk at a midtown firm, attending classes at the Borough of Manhattan Community College, and raising her 13-month-old daughter, Sky. She was petite, standing just 5'4" and weighing 110 pounds, but she had a massive presence. Friends described her as ambitious, sharp, and beautiful. She had rose tattoos on her back and ankle, a symbol of a vibrant personality that refused to be ignored. But there was a shadow hanging over this bright future. Indira shared her apartment on 7th Avenue with her boyfriend, Heriberto Palacio, known to everyone as Eddie. On the surface, they looked like a power couple. Eddie was a building superintendent and a weightlifter with a physique friends compared to Michelangelo's David. There were photos on their wall of happy times, like a romantic Caribbean cruise. But behind closed doors, the relationship was a war zone. Indira loved him deeply. Her family said her boundless love for him was perhaps her only flaw. But love hadn't stopped the violence. In the 2 years they were together, Indira had filed 11 domestic violence complaints against him. Yet, she always stayed. She always bailed him out. She wanted a father for Sky. She wanted to make it work. So when April 2nd arrived, the day after that screaming phone call, and Indira wasn't seen, there wasn't an immediate panic. Her life was volatile. Arguments happened. According to Eddie, the morning of Sunday, April 2nd was routine. He told people that Indira had left the apartment to go to a hairdresser's appointment. It was a perfectly normal explanation, a young woman taking time for herself, a break after a fight. But hours passed, then a day, then 2. The hairdresser appointment story began to fray. Indira was a devoted mother. She had never left her baby Sky for this long without checking in. She had never missed work without calling. By April 7th, 6 full days after the phone call, the silence was deafening. It wasn't Eddie who went to the police. It wasn't the man who claimed to love her. It was her brother, Franklin Davis. He realized something was terribly wrong. His sister, the girl who called him for advice on everything, had vanished. He walked into the precinct and filed the missing persons report that Eddie Palacio had refused to file. The clock had been ticking for 6 days. And in a missing persons case, the first 48 hours are everything. Indira Montiero was already days behind. When detectives finally stepped into the apartment on the 1800 block of 7th Avenue, the runaway theory died almost instantly. Eddie Palacio had told friends she went to the hairdresser, but when police ran down that lead,
They found a dead end. Indira never visited a hairdresser that day. There was no appointment. Inside the apartment, the signs of a departure were completely missing. If a woman leaves her husband or flees a fight, she takes essentials. She takes a bag. She takes clothes. Unlike many people that went missing voluntarily to start a new life, Indira left her contacts to the outside world behind. But investigators found Indira's clothes still in the closet. They found her beeper, a crucial lifeline in the year 2000, left behind. A mother does not leave her child, her clothes, and her only way of being contacted if she plans to come back. And she certainly doesn't leave them if she plans to run away. Then, a clue surfaced that threatened to derail the entire investigation. Miles away, near LaGuardia Airport, a discovery was made. At a mobile gas station next to the Grand Central Parkway, opposite the Delta Airlines terminal, a wallet was found. It contained Indira Montiero's identification and credit cards. At first glance, this looks like a trail. The gas station was near the airport. Had she fled? Had she hopped a plane to escape the abuse? It fit the narrative of a woman pushed too far. But detectives looked closer, and the picture shifted. The wallet was found at a payphone. It was conspicuous. It was sitting there, waiting to be found. But here's the catch. The gas station attendant who found it didn't turn it in immediately. He held on to it for several days, assuming the owner would come back for it. When police finally got their hands on it, they realized the timeline didn't match a flight. Indira hadn't used the credit cards. There was no ticket purchased in her name. Authorities came to a chilling conclusion. This wallet wasn't lost, and it wasn't dropped by Indira as she rushed to catch a flight. It was planted. Someone wanted the police to look at the airport. Someone wanted them to think she was gone, far away. Someone was trying to buy time, and while the police were chasing phantom flights, the real evidence was likely much closer to home, back at the apartment, with the man who hadn't reported her missing. The focus of the investigation swung violently back to Heriberto Eddie Palacio. Detectives wanted to know why he hadn't reported the mother of his child missing. His excuse was legal self-preservation. He told them that Indira had an active order of protection against him. He claimed he didn't go to the police because he was afraid that if he admitted he was near her, he would be arrested for violating the order. It was a convenient excuse, but it was also a confession of just how volatile their life was. Police staked out his car. On April 10th, they found him. Eddie Palacio wasn't just a boyfriend with a temper. As investigators dug into his background, they uncovered a history that turned this case from a missing person inquiry into a potential homicide investigation. Eddie Palacio was a convicted killer. Years earlier, at the age of 14, Eddie and an accomplice had beaten a man to death with a stick and a bat on a Bronx street corner. It was a brutal, rage-filled crime. He had been charged with second-degree murder, but pleaded down to manslaughter, serving only 2 years in prison. This wasn't just a bad boy Indira was dating. This was a man who had taken a life with his bare hands and blunt objects. And his violence hadn't stopped in his teenage years. Just months before Indira vanished, in January 1999, he was charged with attacking a female tenant in the very building where he worked as superintendent. Then, there was the gun. 2 months before she disappeared, Indira had called her brother in tears. Police had come to the apartment on one of her domestic violence calls and found a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. He had tried to pin it on her, telling cops, "That's my girlfriend's." Indira, loyal to a fault, had bailed him out. She posted $500 bail, then later put up $2,250 as collateral to free him again.
She had literally paid for the freedom of the man who police now suspected had killed her. But suspicion isn't proof. The police needed to hold him, but they didn't have a body. They didn't have a murder weapon. So they got creative. They arrested him, not for murder, but on the outstanding order of protection and a new charge, child abandonment. It turned out, while Indira was missing and Eddie was dodging the police, he had left their 1-year-old daughter Sky with a babysitter on April 7th and never came back for her. He had abandoned the woman he claimed to love, and now he had abandoned their child. Eddie Palacio was in custody, but the battle was just beginning.
In mid-April 2000, inside a Manhattan courtroom, a high-stakes legal chess match began. Assistant District Attorney Limi Kang stood before the judge and argued that Eddie Palacio should not be released on bail. She pointed to that terrifying phone call on April 1st. She told the court, "The defendant was yelling at her and swearing at her in a threatening manner, at which time that was the last that anybody has heard or seen Miss Montiero." The prosecution's theory was clear. That scream was the end. He killed her, planted the wallet, and was now trying to walk away. But Eddie's defense attorney, James Phillips, fought back hard. He blasted the prosecution's case. He told the judge, "They are not alleging she is dead." He argued that just because friends and family couldn't contact her, it didn't mean she was murdered. He called the prosecution's case a collection of innuendo and wild speculation. And legally, he had a point. In 2000, prosecuting a nobody homicide was incredibly difficult. Without a body, the defense could always argue, maybe she ran away, maybe she's hiding, maybe she's alive. The wallet at the airport, the very clue police believed was a plant, was now being used by the defense to suggest she had traveled. The system was blinking. Would they let a convicted killer walk free because the police couldn't find where he hid her? But Manhattan Supreme Court Justice Bonnie Whitner looked at the facts. She looked at the one thing Indira loved more than anything, her baby. The judge stated, "It is not that she has not shown up somewhere. She has a 1-year-old. That baby was left with a babysitter. It is almost 2 weeks." The judge granted the request to keep him held, not on murder charges, but on the other charges. It was a temporary victory, a way to buy time for detectives to find Indira. They searched, they interrogated, they pressured Eddie. But Eddie Palacio stayed silent. He knew the game. He knew that without a body, a murder charge might never stick. And he was right. Today, the disappearance of Indira Montiero remains classified as endangered missing, but the reality is much darker. Authorities suspect foul play. They are operating on the presumption that Indira is dead. One high-ranking police department source was blunt. "We believe this is a murder." The theories in this case are few, because the evidence points in only one direction. Theory 1. The argument on April 1st escalated. The scream heard on the phone was the beginning of a fatal attack. Eddie, using his strength and his history of violence, killed her in the apartment. He then used the hairdresser story to buy time to dispose of her body and planted the wallet at the airport to confuse the timeline. This explains the lack of clothes taken, the abandoned baby, and his refusal to call the police. Theory 2. Indira fled. This is the defense's story, that she ran away to escape the abuse, but this ignores every piece of human behavior. It ignores the clothes left behind. It ignores the beeper. And most importantly, it ignores Sky. Indira's family and friends are adamant she would never, ever leave her daughter behind. Indira would be in her mid-40s today. Instead, she has joined the heartbreaking list of missing people who were never found. Her daughter, Sky, is an adult woman who grew up without her mother. Eddie Palacio has never been charged with her murder. The case remains open. The wild speculation the defense attorney argued against is now a decades-long silence. But someone knows where she is. The layout of New York City makes it easy to disappear, but hard to do it alone. Did Eddie have help? Did someone see him moving something heavy from that apartment on 7th Avenue in April 2000? If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Indira Montiero, please contact the NYPD or Crime Stoppers. Her scream was cut short on that phone line, but we can make sure her story isn't silenced. What do you think happened after that phone line went dead? Do you think the planted wallet was a clever diversion or a clumsy mistake that actually proved guilt? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe these victims deserve to be remembered, please like this video and subscribe. It helps us keep the pressure on cases like Indira's.